as I just mentioned to my friend, Jerry Brainum, the walking encyclopedia. That's a compliment. That's a guy that has everything at the ready. No notes. We don't have any phones. We're not looking at any technology. This man knows more information about the sport of bodybuilding, other things too, but bodybuilding than anybody that I know. I don't just say that to anybody, Jerry. I'm serious about that. Jerry Brainum. Hi, thank you.
Good to see you, Ralph.
Oh, great having you here once again. It's been forever, but once in a while we get together. I want to start out with something that I'm thinking about because I've been reading a great deal about this man, and as you know, I'm a Jersey guy, New York guy, but Jersey guy originally.
Hmm.
Dreaming of California, going out there, so on and so forth. It wasn't until I turned about 22 years old, 23, I went out there not as a bodybuilder, but as an actor. So, and I didn't stay, but I came back and forth. But you're in Brooklyn. You're born in Brooklyn, grew up in Brooklyn. You must have had a dream of your own to go to the West Coast.
Well, yeah, I got into bodybuilding when I was 12. Actually, I started exercising at 11, but the first year was like just chins and dips and free weight, body weight. At 12, I started actually working out with weights, and I started reading the magazines, bodybuilding magazines. So there was no internet back then, nothing like that. All you had was bodybuilding magazines for information. And I happened to notice that all the great bodybuilders, most of them, there was great bodybuilders on the East Coast. Don't get me wrong; there was a lot of great bodybuilders, but there was something glamorous about the West Coast bodybuilders. They had the dark tans and running along the beach. And even before that, I could think back to when I was very young. They had a show called the Mickey Mouse Club
Oh
on. You have to be really old to remember that one. That
yeah,
was
yeah.
that was in the mid '50s.
Annette
I was
Funicello.
yeah, I was just a little kid, and apparently, it was from California. That's where it was filmed. And I said to myself, I want to go there. I want to be a Mouseketeer, is what they call them. And at the age of like 6 or 7, I already decided I wanted to move to California. So it started even before bodybuilding.
Wow.
you
I
know,
didn't expect a musketeer story from you now.
yeah, I
That's
mean,
pretty
it's
good.
true. It just came to me now because I was going to tell you that it began with the bodybuilding stuff. But then I thought back, I said, and I remember thinking, I want to go to California I didn't even know where California was. You know, I
So
mean, like,
do you drive or do you fly?
uh, well, you mean, at six?
Originally,
I don't understand the question.
when you went out to California, did you drive
Oh,
or
I
did you fly?
flew. No, I flew. Yeah,
So
I flew.
off the plane, what's the first encounter?
Well, I had my best friend from Brooklyn. His family had moved to California about, let me think, about 2 years before, and they were living in a town called Fullerton, California. And my friend met me at the airport. So he picked me up at the airport, and I stayed with him and his family for about a month or two. I don't remember. And then I got an apartment myself up in West Hollywood, and that's how it all started. Yeah.
And when you arrived, did you hurry to the gym? Did you find yourself a gym right away?
Actually, I did. In other words, I already knew that the big gym at that time, we're talking in 1968, was not Gold's Gym. It was a gym called Vince's Gym.
Yes.
And this is where the top bodybuilders of the West Coast were training. Larry Scott, who had won the Mr. Olympia twice between 65 and 66, Don Ho, all these great bodybuilders seemed to be at, and I knew of Vince's reputation actually because my training partner in New York was a guy named Pete Caputo, and he used to go. He was an actor also. He used to go back and forth between the West Coast and New York. And when he was on the West Coast, he trained at Vince's gym. And it turned out that Vince was a kind of master bodybuilding trainer who was a very avant-garde, way ahead of his time. And he taught Pete a lot of tricks about training. Pete would bring them back to New York. I would try them, and they worked magnificently. They all worked. Everything that he taught me worked. So I made a beeline when I came out here. I was in West Hollywood, and then I moved to Van Nuys. Van Nuys, that's when I joined. It was only about a month after I got here. I joined Vince's gym. I had to take a bus. I remember to go. I didn't have a car for the first 2 years I was here, which was even back then was insane. But I was used to the subways in New York and the buses. We never had to wait more than 5 minutes, and the next
Right.
train would come along. I didn't realize how bad the bus system was out here. And I remember, I still remember, believe it, I used to, it was only a distance of maybe 10 miles at the most.
Uh-huh.
It would take me 2 hours
Oh, jeez.
by bus to go from my apartment in Van Nuys to Vince's gym, because if I missed the bus, the next bus would come along. I'm not exaggerating, in an hour.
Hey.
So after a while, I got schedules where I knew I had to be at a bus stop at a certain time. So it cut the time from maybe 2 hours down to an hour, which is still ridiculous to go 10 miles.
Yeah,
But
it is.
that's, and after 2 years, I bought a secondhand Toyota, and things improved considerably.
Yeah, I guess so. And Gironda's, this guy is a legend, and all the stars were there,
That's right.
all the movie stars. When you walked into that gym, was it something special?
Oh yeah, because as you said, Vince's gym was on Ventura Boulevard. It was just a stone's throw away from Universal Studios, major Hollywood studio. When you walk into Vince's gym, just about every Hollywood star and TV star was training in the gym. I remember when I walked in there, I looked in the gym, and I'm seeing all these guys I see on TV. They're all working out. Now, even I was what, 18 years old. Even back then, though, I knew better than to go up and start bothering them. I wasn't an idolizer. Some people get very excited when they see movie stars.
Yeah.
I was I vowed never to do that, because I had read these people don't like being bothered, and this and that, and I treated them like just other people in the gym. I wouldn't talk to them unless they spoke to me, and so I actually got friendly with some of them more than others. I remember one of the really unfriendly people was Robert Blake.
Oh,
Oh, he had a chip on his shoulder from day one. This guy, I became good friends with Vince right off the bat, because I knew how to handle it. Pete had told me how to handle Vince. There was a certain way you had to deal with him, and if you dealt with him the right way, you got along great with him. And so I got along great with Vince. And I said to Vince, "What's with this guy Blake? I mean," and Vince, all he said was, "He's an asshole." That was his response.
that's it. That
He
was
said,
enough.
and the funny thing was, Blake was about a foot away when he said that. Blake wouldn't dare start up with Vince. He just acted like he didn't hear it. But most of the guys
Uh,
would. I remember talking to what's the name of the guy with the George? He always has a tan. The
oh,
famous
George Hamilton.
George Hamilton. He pulled up one time in a big limo, and he got out, and I see these guys, with the sunglasses, and turned out that at the time he was dating the daughter of the president of the United States. The president at the time was Lyndon Baines Johnson. His
Uh-huh.
daughter was Lucy Johnson. She was in the limo. And so he got out of the limo. He went into the gym, and I'm working at, and there wasn't many people in the gym that day. He comes up to me and he says, I remember I never met this guy. I
Right, right.
recognized him immediately, but I acted like I didn't know who he was. He says to me, "You know why I'm here?" I said, "Why?" He says, "Because I'm about to start a TV series. And if people see me, and I have to, some scenes I have to take my shirt off. If people see me with my shirt off, they're going to vomit." That was his exact words. So, I shook it. Very nice, down to earth guy, very friendly guy, really nice guy.
You're not the first person that told me bad things about Blake.
Oh, horrible person. Oh,
Because he was known for that. He later, I think he murdered his wife, but who
I
knows?
do too.
I mean, it's obvious that he did. He got away with it, but I think he
Yeah,
passed away fairly recently,
yeah,
didn't he?
he did.
Yeah, yeah. So you encounter all these movie stars in a gym that I heard. Now you tell me if I'm wrong. You know better. It wasn't anything spectacular inside as far as equipment goes, but as
No,
far as personnel goes, you had everybody there, but equipment not so much, right?
well, I was shocked when I walked into Vincent Gym how small it was. It was this
Hmm.
little building, square little building. You walk in, it was the size of a big living room. I mean, it was very small gym, but it's very, very concentrated in equipment. You had the free weights, you had a couple machines all over the place. It was very good. But I got to tell you a little quick story about related to the movie star. One guy was particularly friendly. He was an older man. He had a big white beard, and I used to talk to him all the time. A very friendly guy. And I would, I was kind of a movie fan myself. Especially the older movies, and I would hear this guy's voice, and I'd say, I recognize that voice. He never told me his name,
Hmm.
but we would talk all the time. And I said, I know this guy's voice. And from one day I went to Vince. I said, who is that guy? He says, that's Larry Parks. Larry Parks, you have to be a movie fan to remember him. His biggest movie was called The Jolson Story.
Uh-huh.
He played Al Jolson, the legendary entertainer, and he looked completely different as an actor. He was a very slim, dark hair. He
Uh-huh.
was unrecognizable as an older man. He had a big beard. He was heavier. But I remember he was the nicest guy you could imagine. Later on, I found out he was a victim of the McCarthy era. In other words, as a young man, he had inadvertently joined a communist party. The actors didn't know what the communist party. They heard it was a socialist thing that
Yeah.
was meant to help people. They didn't know anything bad about it. So he joined that, and they dug it out. It killed his career. His career was done. It was very sad. But he was the nicest man. What a nice guy he was.
Well, I love those great stories and the bad ones too. I like to know who was great and who was
Yeah,
not so great. It's
yeah.
very it's
And
very interesting. Now,
I
did Vince treat the movie stars differently than he treated
Yes,
the
he did.
members?
He sure did. He did. I mean, there was a story. Remember Eric Estrada from that?
Sure.
What
Chips.
was Chips? Yeah, he was training Erica. Vince would actually personally train the movie stars. He'd personally get on the floor and train them. And he was training Eric Estrada one day, and I remember the doors. It was kind of a warm day, and you had a front door and you had a back door in the back, and usually they'd be kept open for air circulation because they didn't have any kind of air conditioner or anything like that. So one of the other members, while Vince was training Eric Estrada, he came up to Vince. He said, "Hey Vince, could you open the doors? We got to get some air in here." I remember Vince turned to that member and he says Eric doesn't like the doors open, so if you don't like it, get the fuck out. And he said just like that.
Jeez.
Just didn't care. I mean, this guy was a nobody, and Eric Estrada was doing the show at that time. He was a big TV star.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, Vince definitely treated the movie stars differently. There's no question.
And you could not squat. No squat racks.
Oh, no squat racks. No, Vince hated squats. The one thing, well, among other things, Vince thought that having a big behind was one of the ugliest manifestations of human anatomy. So he thought that squats was a big ass builder and it was a useless exercise. And he had variations of squat. He was big on hack squats and he did have a leg extension machine. But I mean, no squat rack. In fact, that's the main reason why Arnold, when he came out, he joined Vince's only about a month after I did, 1968. He trained there for 9 months, but he left Vince's gym for two reasons. The main reason being that Arnold's weak points were always his legs, and he felt that without squats he couldn't develop his legs properly. So that was the main reason. The second reason was that him and Vince really didn't get along that well. Vince thought he was a big dummy. He used to call him Cement Head. That was his
Hmm.
name for Arnold, and Arnold got tired of it and just went to Gold's Gym. That's when So you're right.
Did he call him a fat fuck when he walked in?
Yeah,
Am
he
I right
called
on
it.
that?
Yeah, the story was that when Arnold first showed up, I remember Vince telling me, he says, because again, I used to sit in the front. He had some chairs behind the desk there, so I'd sit and chat with Vince. He was such a hilarious, funny guy. Really, he used to crack me up the stories he would tell me. I remember him telling me about being a dancer in the 1940 movies. Hilarious. Anyway, he said to me, "Hey, you know who's coming to the gym today?" I said, "Who?" He says, "That guy Schwitzenbender." He goes. I said, "You mean Arnold Schwarzenegger?" He says, "Yeah, that's the guy." I said, "He's a big sensation, Vince." He says that he's like 21 years old. He's already won two Mr. Universe titles. So sure enough, Arnold shows up maybe 2, 3 hours later. First thing he says, he walks up to Vince, who's sitting in that one of the same chairs. He used to have these kind of twisted, weird looking cigars, the kind that Clint Eastwood would smoke in those,
Mhm.
those Italian Western.
Yeah.
He would have in his mouth unlit. He would just have them. And Arnold Schwarzenegger walks up to him and says in broken English, "I am Arnold Schwarzenegger, Mr. Universe." And Vince slowly looks him up and down, and then looks at him and says, you look like just a big fat fuck to me."
I mean, who could get away? Well, you know, he was a little smooth at that point, but
Yeah, he was
he was humongous though, right?
very big. I met him that day, and he was huge. He was, I mean, I felt like a peanut next to this guy. I mean,
How tall was Arnold?
Arnold was 6'1" when he was younger. He was actually,
Okay.
because I was 5'11". He was a little bit taller than me. Strange thing is, I don't know if you know that, but as people age, their spinal discs tend to compress. I'll give you an example. Howard Hughes, the famous Howard Hughes, he was 6'4" most of his life. At his autopsy, he was only 6 foot. He had lost 4 inches in height. Or he was a very unhealthy guy. But when I see Arnold these days, which is rare, we're actually eye to eye. He's my height.
Yeah.
I've actually shrunk a little. I used to be 5'11" when I was younger, and now I'm only 5'10". I've lost an inch myself.
I lost an inch and a half myself. Don't tell anybody. I'll sit down the whole interview. Nobody will know. That's that's unbelievable how well, first of all, that we shrink. That's
Yeah,
very depressing. But
yeah.
now then when you're talking about the movie stars, let's talk about the ones that trained with Gironda as opposed to the Gold's Gym guys. Who were the Gironda guys and who were the Gold's Gym guys?
Well, the Gironda guys, it would take an hour because, like I said, he had just about you name. I mean, Clint Eastwood, uh, just about every movie star. Clint Eastwood used to come to the gym before he became a movie star. I didn't see this. Vince told me this, and he had nothing to do. He would just like sleep on one of the benches, fall asleep. He didn't have any work. He just would, because he worked. He was under contract to Universal, and if they didn't have any work for him, he would just hang around. He didn't do anything.
Uh,
There was dozens of them. I can't remember them offhand, but Gold's Gym, I remember they had quite a few movie stars too. I remember one day when I was training during the day, I saw Richard Dreyfuss there.
mm.
Now, Richard Dreyfuss was the star of one of my all-time favorite movies, which was what was it called again? The one about
The
the
Goodbye Girl.
no, the other one about the aliens.
Oh yes, Close Encounters.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I've seen that movie like 20 times. I love it. Anyway, I saw him in the gym and I was going to go up to him because like I say, it's always in my habit not to go up to actors, because I know people do it all the time and I know that it gets annoying after a while if you're famous. So I was going to go up to him and he gave off these vibes of such nastiness that I picked up on it immediately. I walked right by him. And there's that other guy. Oh God, I can't remember his name. He does a million movies. Can't remember his name. He used to walk around. This one other guy does a lot of movies. He used to walk around a hood and always trying to cover his face
Mm,
because he was afraid that people would come up and bother. Nobody really gave a damn. That's
mm.
the thing. In Gold's Gym and Vince's, nobody bothered the movie star. The regular members didn't go up and ask him for orders. That never happened. Never happened. One guy who was a nice guy was Ted Danson.
Oh yeah.
Come to Goals a lot. He might still go because I haven't been there in the day in a long time. He probably still a member. I didn't talk to him, but he was a nice guy. Jean-Claude Van Damme, when he was younger, he had an attitude. Now I found out later on that he was using a lot of coke and drugs, and he was
Yeah.
also bipolar. Now, as an older guy, it's a funny story because when he was younger, he was training and hanging out with Mickey Rourke
Yeah.
and a bodybuilding friend of mine named Danny Hester. They used to all train together at Gold's, and he had an attitude. You could see it. Van Damme had an attitude, so I never went up to him. Danny was a good friend of mine. I talked to him. Mickey Rourke, I had a big conversation with. I remember outside the gym one time. He had made a movie called 2.5 Weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. 9.5 weeks.
9.5 weeks. Is that what? Yeah. And that blonde actress, I can't remember her name again.
Yeah. Her name's on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah. Anyway, I saw the movie and I remember asking Mickey Rourke. He was standing there smoking a cigarette right after he worked.
Yeah.
I said, Mickey, please don't be offended by this question, but I saw that movie 9.5 weeks. And could you tell me what it was about? I still don't understand the whole movie. And he goes like this. His answer was, hey, I was in the movie and I don't understand what it was about. That was his movie.
It was a little twisted plot. Yes,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was.
he was a really nice guy. But here's the funny story about Van Damme. Years later, as you know, this is only a couple of years ago. I'm sitting on a bench resting, and Van Damme comes in. He used to bring his dog in the gym. I remember, you know, he was a completely different guy now. He comes up to me and he shakes my hand. Remember, I never spoken to him. He says,
Yeah.
"Good to see you again." And I said, "Good to see you too." I never spoke to the guy. He was
Well, yeah.
completely different attitude.
Well, you know, the coke will do that. The young, you
Yeah,
know, the young guy, he's got an attitude when he's younger. Maybe he saw
yeah,
the error of his ways. But
right.
yeah, how was Van Damme's physique?
Very good. You know, when he was younger, he was, very, lean, not a big guy, but no body fat. As an older guy, he was still in good shape. I
Mm.
mean, he showed signs of aging, of course, but he kept in really good shape. I have to admit, he was in great shape all the time. Never saw him out of shape. And
Who was the most? Go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry.
I met his two kids at Gold's Gym, his son and daughter. He married a famous female bodybuilder. I'm so bad on names, I can't remember her name either, but it'll come to me. Anyway, he married her, had kids with her. And they were, I guess they were like either in the early 20s or teenagers. I met them. Very nice kids.
Mm.
The daughter and the son were very, very friendly, very nice kids, I remember.
Who would you say had the most impressive physique that I would not recognize and the folks listening would not recognize? Like some unsung guy that just was so impressive, but for some reason never did very much. Do you have a person?
Are you talking about a bodybuilder?
Yeah, bodybuilder, out there, just a lot of these guys didn't like to compete, yet they had
Yeah,
incredible physiques.
yeah. There's a lot of them that come to mind. I'm trying to remember the names. There was quite a few guys. They have these guys. I call them gym physiques because they walk around in the gym. When you see them, they're wearing tank tops where you can see their arms and shoulders, and very often they wear shorts too. And they have tremendous physiques walking around. And I look at them, I say, "Who is this guy? I wonder if he competes."
Yeah.
And then if I very rarely talk to them, and if I do, I find out that they don't compete. And then sometimes I'll see them posing, and I realize, they'll start flexing in the mirror. I realize why they don't compete because these guys look great. I call them gym physiques because they look great walking around with their arms down in the gym, but when
Yeah.
they flex, it doesn't come out. There's like
Yeah.
nothing there. So, there's dozens of guys like that. Even today in the gym, there's dozens of guys. They
Oh,
don't want to compete, but they look good. They're constantly flexing and looking at themselves. But in a contest, they would not place in the top three, because they're lacking too many. They don't have back muscles, all this and that. The legs might be off, I don't remember any of their names because honestly, I didn't talk to. I spoke to people more when I was writing for the magazines. I wrote for a magazine called Flex Magazine. I had my own column where I would, go up to people at Gold's Gym that were there that I'd never been there before. These were up and coming bodybuilders and nobody ever heard of. Some of them hadn't even competed yet. And I'd say, "Hey, look, I'd like to do a little article on you." I used to work on little cameras before digital cameras and all that, before the cell phones. And I would take a photo of them. They'd pose. I took men and women. They'd pose. I take a photo, and I'd interview them. I do a little short story. This is the very first. All these people wanted publicity because they knew that publicity was attached to winning a contest. In other words, if you're in the magazines, you actually had a greater chance of winning. Believe it or not, there was a relationship there. So they were all very cooperative, and I'd interview them, take the picture, and uh, quite a few of them. One of them I remember this girl was training with another girl. I went up to her and she had an impressive physique. Not a female body, but you could see that she had the structure. She had some muscle on her already.
hmm.
And she went on, she was using the name Joanne, I remember. She went on to become that very famous female wrestler who passed away a couple of years, China.
China.
This was China. She had now, but you have to understand, when I interviewed her, she was just an average girl. I mean, she was athletic looking, but not big, not at all. She was very pretty. She looked normal. She was training with another woman. I think she said it was a sister. And nobody ever heard of her. I just went up to her because I thought she had potential. So that's what I would do. I'd see people in the gym, they look like they might be bodybuilders. I would interview them. Nobody ever heard of them. They never competed. One of the guys I did that with, he was about 19 at the time. This guy had competed. I think he'd won one contest back east. He was with another guy who I already knew named Chris Aceto, who was he was a former bodybuilder who was still to this day, he's kind of a coach. Yeah, he coaches pro bodybuilders. I knew Chris pretty well because he used to be married to a female bodybuilder who I did stories on named Laura Cravel. But anyway, I went up to him and I said, "Who's your friend there, man? He looks pretty good." This guy was really already very impressive, but I never saw him before. He says, "Oh, he's a guy from back east. What the hell is his name? God, I'm so bad on names. My brain's going. The guy who won Big Guy won Mr. Olympia 4 times, blonde guy.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Yeah, I'll get his name too. Give me a time.
Yeah,
I just saw one of his videos, as a matter of fact.
yeah,
I
yeah,
can't think.
I mean, and he's a good friend of mine too. It's embarrassing.
Kind of a blocky
Fuck,
physique.
that's it. You got the guy.
Yeah, I can't
Remember,
picture him.
he had been unknown. He had only won a teenage contest, and I looked at him. He was wearing again the tank tops and the shorts.
Yeah.
What I noticed was his legs were tremendous. I mean, pro level legs already. So I went up to him and I interviewed him, and that was the very first publicity he ever got. That was the first article he ever got in Bodybuilding magazine. And of course, within about 2-3 years, he started becoming pretty famous. And then when he won, about 6-7 years later, he won. He won started competing in Mr. Olympia. They wound up winning it 4 times. Yeah.
Yeah, and I cannot think of his name. I don't feel like Googling, but you in the comments, leave your, yell at and scream at me because I can't think of his name. Well, I'll give you a name. Just give me the first thing that pops into you.
Jay Cutler's name.
Of course, there we go.
Jay Cutler.
He has the same name as a quarterback.
Exactly.
So I that's how I remembered his name in the past, but it didn't come to me. Jay Cutler. We don't want to shortchange Jay, 4-time Olympia winner. I'll give you a few names from the past, some of my favorites. Just give me your impression. Okay. Robbie Robinson.
Robbie Robinson, a very strange guy in some ways. Robbie is a super introvert. Robbie is he's one of those guys that a lot of times he'll walk by you, not say a word, even if you know him. But other times he's very friendly. I got to be pretty friendly with Robbie. I remember the first time I saw him was at the 1975 AAU Mr. America contest. I was standing at the back of the auditorium with a famous bodybuilder named Dennis Tenorino, who was a good friend of mine. I know him way back from New York. He was a Mr. America and Mr. Universe too. And we were watching the contest. All of a sudden, this guy comes out and he starts posing. And Dennis and I, our jaws both dropped because this guy looked like a professional already. He's in an amateur. I said, "Who the hell is this guy?" And they said he was Robbie Robinson from Florida, and I said, "My God, this guy has to win, Dennis." And Dennis agreed with me because he just destroyed everybody in the contest. But I forget how, I don't know whether, I know he placed in the top 5, but he didn't even come close to winning. He was won by a guy named Dale Adrian, who, that was his biggest I competed myself against Dale Adrian. I lost. Dale Adrian was a Mr. California. Dale Adrian had tremendous leg development. He had a really good physique too. Little guy, not a big guy, but he had really nice build. He was much better than me, I have to admit. But that's who won the Mr. In fact, that was the same year, 1975. He won Mr. America.
Now, was that true that his torso had Joe Weider's head on it?
Oh, yeah.
That's what they used.
That was
was he aware of that? Did he give the okay with that?
Not okay with that. That was a big source of problems for Robbie. Because what happened was Joe approached Robbie and he wanted to put a sculpture. He says, "I want to put a sculpture of you in the Weider building, the main office in Woodland Hills." And the pose was like this. That was Joe Weider's signature pose. In the magazines, there would be a little picture of his head turned like this with Clarence Ross's body in his head. Clarence Ross was 1945 Mr. America.
Mhm.
So, they put Joe Weider's head. So, Joe Weider approached Robbie and said, I want to put this statue of you in the Weider lobby. And of course, Robbie liked that. He said, sure. And he posed for this, he agreed to it. So they came out for it was a kind of a funny story. They came out, there was an unveiling of the statue, a little ceremony there at the Woodland Hills office. Robbie shows up with his girlfriend at the time, and they're all excited. Robbie says, oh, wait till you see this. It's fantastic. He's expecting to see himself. He knew what the pose was going to be like this, just the upper body. And they unveil it, and it's Joe Weider with Robbie's body. And Robbie said, I was speechless. He couldn't believe it. He thought he couldn't believe it. And went up, Joe, how could you do this to me? And oh, it's no big deal, Rob, blah, blah. He tried to play it down and this and that. Kind of what Trump's doing now with, hey, these files, these Epstein files, they're no,
Right.
he tried to brush it aside. But, Robbie was so pissed off about it that he decided he wanted to sue Joe Weider, believe it or not. So one day I get a call from a lawyer, and he says, I'm calling in behalf of Robbie Robinson. Are you aware that Joe Weider promised Robbie that he would put the statue, and he put his own head on there, and we're going after Joe Weider for that. It was, whatever. And so the lawyer says to me this statement. He says, would you testify in court that is unquestionably Robbie Robinson's body with Joe Weider's head? And I said, I could not testify to that in court, as much as I like Robbie, because of the unique pose. In a pose like this, it could be anybody. That was not Robbie's unique pose. I said, if it was a double arm shot like that, that would be uniquely Robbie. But in that pose, you can't say for sure. And so he says, thank you. Robbie was so mad at me, he didn't talk to me for 2 years.
Yeah.
What can I do?
He's that kind of a guy to hold a grudge, I guess.
Yeah, he was pissed. But I mean, I would be lying if I said it was unquestionably. That's the way he put it. Unquestionably Robbie's body.
Well, you're so right. This could be anyone.
It could be anybody, really. I mean, in the original picture in the magazine, it was Clarence Ross's body. Nobody knew that. I knew that. But, Joe, because Clarence Ross was he was a 1945 Mr. America. He was tremendous. He was called the king of bodybuilders in the 40s and 50s. Joe would never use a picture of himself because he didn't have that kind of muscle.
I think I saw Ross come out on You Bet Your Life with Groucho Marx one time. It might have been him or some other old-time bodybuilder, but I'll give you another one. Serge Nubret, one of my favorites.
Serge Nubret was another interesting character. Serge Nubret would come, he lived in France, of course. He would come in every year to Gold's Gym, to train for the contest. This is what I'm talking about, the original Gold's Gym. We're talking the early 70s. And he would always come with a guy named Paco. And this guy, Paco, was a big, obese, fat guy, who used to wear big gold chains. And the word was that he was a very wealthy guy. Hello? Can you hear me, Ralph?
I'm here. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, you went off for a second. Anyway, he would show up with this guy, Paco. And the story about Paco was that he inherited some sort of company. He was a very wealthy guy. And he was a gay guy who was infatuated with bodybuilders. Now, what Paco would do was bring us suitcases full of steroids. It was like cheese to a mouse, you know what I'm saying? He'd get the bodybuilder. Now, what they did, I couldn't tell you. I know he had a mansion in Spain where a lot of bodybuilders, when they went to Europe, they'd stay in his mansion too. But the interesting story about Serge Nubret was one year Serge came in, and I don't think he was with Paco this time. He came and he told the other bodybuilders said to Serge, how do you get that hard look? Is there a secret? I mean, is it the training? Is it the diet? Is it certain drugs? How do you get that look? Serge says, actually, I'm going to tell you my secret. I use a certain type of thyroid drug that you guys don't know about, because all the guys were using a thyroid drug called Cytomel. Mm-hmm. It was what they call a T3 thyroid. It's a very active thyroid drug. Most doctors will not give that out. It's too powerful for most people. But anyway, so Serge says it's called Triacana. He says this is unique because you guys, when you take thyroid, if you take too much, it starts to break down your muscle. I said, he says, you don't want that. This stuff will make you cut to the bone like me. He says, and you won't lose any muscle at all. So, he told several top bodybuilders, Ken Waller, Bill Grant, all these other guys, maybe even Arnold. I'm not sure if it was Arnold, but he told those guys, he gave them this Triacana thyroid drug, told them the dosage to take, and all of them lost muscle.
I was going to say,
They all lost
shrunk.
muscle. It turned out that the Triacana had more side effects than the regular thyroid drug. And, as I got to know Serge Nubret, to this day, I kind of think he did that purposely, because remember, these were his competitors.
That's right. He sabotaged everybody.
Another quick story about Serge Nubret. One time I was set to interview. He had a protege named Terry Pastel. I don't know if you ever heard of him. Terry Pastel, shorter guy, almost built like Serge, like a version of Serge Nubret, shorter, with unbelievable arm development, very small waist like Serge, great athlete. I was supposed to meet him at Gold's Gym to interview him. So anyway, I show up. I think the interview was set for 3 p.m. I got in a little traffic, so I showed up at 3:10. Now, Terry Pastel did not speak English. Serge Nubret, his mentor, was going to be the translator. And Serge spoke English, not great English, but he understood most of it. He was going to be my translator. I get to the gym at 3:10. Terry Pastel's not there, but Serge Nubret is there, and he just immediately erupts on me. He says, "Why are you late?" I thought he was going to hit me. He was so mad. He says, blah blah blah. He starts yelling, and this and that. And so I look at him, not saying anything. I said, "So I apologize. I got in traffic, Serge. I really am sorry." I said, "Where's Terry? Let's start the interview." He says, "Terry's not here yet."
But how dare you be late?
Yeah, how dare I be late? Terry shows up 20 minutes late.
What I remember about Serge is that just standing there without any kind of flexing or anything, he was incredibly impressive. In a relatively relaxed position, he was incredible, wasn't he?
Arnold Schwarzenegger himself gave me a statement once. He said to me that standing relaxed, Serge Nubret is the best bodybuilder in the world. He beats even me. This was never published, never said it in public, but he told me that. And I said, and then he added, he says, but Serge, remember I was talking about the guys in the gym bodies?
Yeah.
He says Serge loses it when he brings his arm up like this, because suddenly he didn't have the lats. You could see his weak points when he started flexing. But with anything with the arms down, those poses with his with his arms on his side, he was literally unbeatable. He had a unique body, because normally when you have great abs, you tend to have a slightly thicker or wider waist, because when you train your abdominal muscles, you also work the sides of the waist, the oblique muscles, and these tend to give you a wider waist when they're fully developed. As a matter of fact, Steve Reeves always said that he refused to do any abdominal work because he knew that it would develop his obliques, and he loved having a tiny waist. He had a 29-inch waist. And so what happened was, the thing about Serge Nubret was he had a tiny waist, but he also had very deep abs. He was one of the few guys that had that look. It was free. So did Terry Pastel, his protege. They had that look that, because you have to understand, in those days, the European look was very, very aesthetic. They like to have, very symmetrical. All the European bodies, there's a guy named Pierre van der Steen, had unbelievable abdominals. I mean, you got to see him in person to believe him. I mean, they looked like they were etched out of stone. All the European bodybuilders, their trademark was tremendous abdominal development. So Serge was unique in that respect.
And they said all he ate was horse meat.
Yeah, he told me he ate 12 pounds a day of horse meat.
Jesus God.
I said, Serge, remind me not to ride my pony around you.
Yeah, no horse is safe with that guy.
No horse is safe.
12 pounds of meat. Yeah, good.
The thing is, horse meat, I don't know if it's still this way. Horse meat was popular in France.
It's very lean, very lean.
Very lean. That's what Serge said. He said there's no fat. That's what he liked about it. No fat.
Okay, the elephant in the room. We have to talk about Arnold just a little bit because you knew him so well.
I
Talk
did.
about Arnold, something behind the scenes, not something aside from his public persona.
Did I ever tell you about the time Arnold, Bill Grant, and I went to the nude beach?
No, no, but tell me.
Great story. Great story. Uh, in 1973, I believe it was. You've heard of Venice Beach, right?
Of
Famous beach.
course, yes.
Okay. For it started with a couple of gay people. There was a certain stretch of the beach where, for some reason, they decided. It started with female gay people, lesbians. They started walking around topless. It was kind of a statement, don't, if the men can be, topless, we're going to be. Anyway, they felt it was more comfortable. Then the next thing you know, suddenly everybody in that stretch of the beach was nude. They took off their clothes. They were naked. So I was training in the original Gold's Gym with Arnold and Bill. I was training with Bill Grant that day, and Arnold was there. And we finished the workout, and Arnold turns and says, "Let's go down to the beach." I said, Arnold, you mean straight down? He says, yeah. He says, yeah. I said, Arnold, you know that's a naked beach now. He says, so what? So, so we get. I think Arnold had a BMW. We could have easily walked to the beach, but we got in Arnold's BMW and we drove like 2 blocks down to the beach.
Mhm.
And I'm wearing like posing trunks under my workout clothes, and so Bill Grant has that. We get to the beach. We put a little blanket down. It's me, Bill Grant, and Arnold. And man, you have to understand, I have to add this. This was 1973, about 2 weeks before the Mr. Olympia contest. Arnold was in the best shape of his life. He
Mm.
was incredible condition. Bill Grant was in incredible condition. I was nothing compared to those two guys, but I was still in contest condition too, right? We get to the beach, and sure enough, everybody around us is naked.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at Arnold, I'm thinking, is he going to really strip down? Arnold immediately takes off all his clothes. He's completely naked. Bill Grant and I chicken out. We stripped down to our trunks. I just was too shy. Even though everyone around was naked, I just couldn't
Yeah.
go naked. I just couldn't do it. And same with Bill Grant. And we're all lying there. And as we're lying there, I'm lying right next to Arnold. This naked girl walks by, and Arnold says to me, he says, Jerry, this is a good thing. I said, what do you mean? It's good that they have a beach like this where guys who never got laid could see what naked women look like. That was his exact word. And then, as we're lying there, I look ahead. There's this guy on a blanket with his wife, and he again. This is before they had cell phone. He has a camera, and he's you have to understand that people at the nude beach, most of them were out of shape. In fact, I
Yeah.
went down there once with a friend of mine, Dave Dupree, and we were walking around, and he says to me, "You know what, Jerry?" He says somebody should pay these people to keep their clothes on
True.
because they honestly they look like shit. Most of them, the
Yeah.
men and the women. The women had flat. Anyway, so Arnold. I mean, even among all these naked people, see, there was an unwritten rule at the nude beach: you don't look at somebody else,
Mm.
even though they're naked. You can't look at them. That was an unwritten rule. But because of Arnold's, the way he looked, he was like, the only way, because just imagine a spaceship landing there on the beach, and that's the way Arnold looked compared to these people, right? So he's getting a lot of looks. So this guy in the blanket ahead of him with his wife, he's had a little camera, he's focusing it, and Arnold's kind of dozing off, he isn't, and I nudge Arnold, I said, hey Arnold, I said, I think there's a guy trying to take a picture of you there, right there, a couple of feet ahead. Arnold says, where's this? I said, look, that guy there. And so Arnold looks and he gets up and remember, he's naked. Now, do you remember that walk he has in the Terminator?
Oh yeah, of course.
He has the Terminator. He walks right up to the guy and his wife. And as each step he takes, I'm looking, the guy's eyes are getting wider and wider because it just is almost like a human Terminator coming at him. And Arnold stands over, everything's hanging out. He's standing right above the guy and his wife. And he says to the guy, if you continue to take photos of me, I would have to remove all the film from your camera. You must stop right now. And the guy says, oh, okay. he takes the camera, he throws it in a beach bag. It was hilarious.
This is 1973. I think his best shape.
Oh,
Wouldn't
he
you
was
say?
tremendous. Oh, absolutely. I mean, but I'll never forget how when Arnold stripped down that day, that all these people were not supposed to look at each other. Just imagine like 500 people, whatever it was on the beach, all staring at Arnold. They couldn't believe their eyes. They'd never seen anything like that.
Well, you know, the nude beaches are notorious for ugly bodies.
Oh my
You
God.
think you're going to go there and see these beautiful bodies, but no,
Horrible.
no,
Horrible.
folks. You just see one just out of shape
Oh no,
person.
Dave Dupre was right about that. I mean, because we were looking, I had these guys with the big bellies hanging out, and
Oh yeah.
and the girls, they just didn't look good. I mean, come on, I mean, it was just, I don't know why they wanted to walk around naked. I mean, I just, I couldn't. It was their thing. What can I say?
I'll give you one who used to, I think, live next door to you. How
Who's
about
that?
our friend Frank Zane?
Oh, Frank Zane. Yeah, yeah. Did I ever tell you the cheese story?
The cheese story. No, tell me.
Okay, I lived, this was on 230 Bay Street. I still remember the address. Santa Monica, 2 blocks from the beach. I was in apartment 12. Frank Zane and his wife Christine lived in apartment 11. And one day, I was a nice guy back. I was going to college at Santa Monica College. I would let people, the expression was crashing. People would need a place to sleep for a night. I'd let them sleep on my couch. It was a furnished apartment. So one day there was a guy named Bob Leff who he overstayed his welcome. I mean, he stayed at my place like 2 weeks. Now I was training for a bodybuilding contest, and I was on a meat and egg diet, which I got from Vince Gironda, by the way.
Mhm.
Because it would I'd go on that diet, I'd lose every drop of fat on my body. It worked fantastic. There was only one problem: you weren't allowed any carbohydrates. It was what today they would call it a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet. My problem was after a while eating just a meat patty, I couldn't do it. I had to put a little bit of cheese on the top. So I kept cheese in the refrigerator. So one day I come home and I'm hungry. I go in the refrigerator to cook my meat and eggs, and I see there's no cheese. And Bob left sitting on my couch watching my TV. I said, "Hey Bob, what happened to Did you eat my cheese?" He says, "Yeah." He says, I'm sorry, Jerry." I said, "I can't. Now I got to go to the supermarket because I can't eat this hamburger patty without my cheese." He said, "I'm sorry, Jerry. I didn't know. I'm sorry. No problem. Just don't do it again, okay?" All right. But 2 days later, come home, go to make my patty, no cheese again. Now Left is sitting there watching the TV. I said, "Bob, did you eat my cheese again?" And he goes like this. He says, "Fuck your cheese." He says, he says, "Leave me alone with your fucking cheese." I said, "What?" Now you have to understand, I've been on this meat and eggs diet for a
Yeah,
couple of weeks,
yeah,
and your nerves get on edge.
yeah.
You get like real bad temper,
Of
real.
course.
I said, "What'd you say?" He said, "Fuck you." I said, "You said fuck my," and I ran up to him. This guy was 6'2", but I grabbed him and I literally lifted him off his feet and I threw him down the
Threw him down the
stairs,
stairs.
right? And it
Yeah,
was concrete stair. I could have killed him. Luckily,
yeah.
instead he gets up and runs. He says, "You're crazy. You're insane." He runs out down the street. And I have my door open. I'm standing there seething. And all of a sudden, Frank Zane walks in wearing boxer shorts and a tank top, doesn't say a word. He hands me a plate of cube cheese and walks out. Doesn't say a word. Doesn't say. I'll never forget that.
That says a lot about Frank. He's on the spot, ready to help.
In fact,
Uh,
I saw him a couple of years ago. He was appearing at he was getting doing a seminar at a contest, and they had a question and answer session. And of course, Frank knows me very well. And I got up and said, "Hey, Frank, do you remember giving me that cheese 50 years ago?" He says, "Yeah, I do."
now, see that some things you never forget. The small things you don't forget.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think about Frank. I think about, they called him the chemist, but they called
yeah,
him the chemist for reasons that you wouldn't necessarily think. It wasn't
right.
exactly because he mixed his drugs properly. It was some other reason. I can't remember what. But now, would you say to me that's the greatest? See, that's my kind of physique. I love that kind of physique.
Yeah,
But I heard, and you tell me if I'm wrong, Jer. He would, appear. He would always be covered up, so no one would know what was
that's
under
true.
that shirt, the pants, and so on and so forth. But he would appear like maybe 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks out from a big show, and you'd say, "There's no way this guy's gonna get in shape in time." Was that the case with Frank?
That was the case. Like 2, 3 weeks before a show, I mean, Frank Zane never got fat. I
Mm,
mean, he was always a lean guy, but you'd see him. I mean, you could see some of him. His body. He did cover himself up most of the time, but sometimes for the hell of it, he would take his shirt off and pose. I remember he did that, and again, the original Gold's Gym. And I'm looking, and Arnold was standing there, and Arnold would say, "Hey, you look great, Frank," and all this. And I'm thinking to myself, "Looks great. He's got a contest, Mr. Universe, in 2 weeks." I said, "He looks like he's got 2 months to go." I said, Frank looked lean, but he didn't look hard. He still had some subcutaneous. He didn't look like a winner. In other words, then all of a sudden, he goes to the contest, and he looks shredded, ripped.
mm,
He did this all the time. Frank did this all the time, you know. But I got one more quick story about Frank. You're gonna like
yeah,
it. Did I ever tell you the one about the Frank's trophies?
no.
Oh, this is a great one. Again, I was going to college back then. Frank was my next door neighbor. And one day he comes up to me, he says, Jerry, I'm moving like 2 blocks away. He says, could you hold my trophies until I get settled in my apartment? I said, no problem. Because it was easy. Frank he took 10 steps and he's in my apartment.
Mhm.
So I helped him carry all these trophies, and we put them in my living room. I had probably 15 trophies, all of them. And so about a couple of days later, I'm at school. This girl approaches me, and she missed a couple of classes. She says, do you have the notes for those classes? I said, yeah, but I have them at my apartment. If you want to follow me, I can give you the notes. She wasn't trying to pick me up or anything,
Yeah.
just so she follows me there, and we walk into my apartment. And the first thing she sees is all these trophies in the living room lined up, all these trophies. And she goes and starts reading them. And Mr. Universe, Mr. America, Mr. International. And she turns to me and she says, are these your trophies? And I look and I say, well, it's my apartment.
Hey,
True story.
that's a
Yeah.
that's a that's a good one.
Yeah.
I'll give you a female.
Okay.
For going the one that to me, the one that started the whole thing. Maybe there were a few before, but Rachel McClish.
Oh yeah, Rachel was very sensitive. She had a competitor at the time in this early female bodybuilding, as you say. She was Mr. Olympia in 1980, the first Miss Olympia, and she had a competitor who was one of her main competitors was a woman named Lynn Conkright, who went on to work for the Weider office, passed away a couple of years ago. A nice person, and I used to tease Rachel because I knew Rachel. I knew her pretty well from Gold's Gym. Wasn't that friendly with her, but uh, I was anyway. I used to go every time I'd walk by her. I'd say stuff like I'd call her by her competitors' names, just
Hmm.
teasing her. So one day I said she was at the chinny bar, and I said, "Hey Lynn, good luck in that contest." And she looked at me and she started crying. She says, "Why do you always call me by other people's names?" She got so upset. I felt bad. I mean, she
Yeah, yeah.
really, I said, "Listen, Rachel, of course I know you. I was just teasing. I'm sorry. I won't do it again." You know, but that was my main racial story. But I mean, she was
Was she that sensitive?
very sensitive.
Mm,
And maybe later on she didn't, because I don't know. This is in her early bodybuilding days. But I
yeah.
remember there was a bodybuilder that came out. She did something which I really didn't like. It was none of my business, but a bodybuilder came out, and this guy was probably one of the greatest genetic bodybuilders ever. He was a guy named Matt Mendenhall.
I know the name.
Matt Mendenhall came out with his wife. I don't know where he came from, somewhere back east. His wife was very devoted to him. She was a little dark-haired woman, I remember. And as soon as he went and met Rachel, he went like nuts over her, and he literally dumped his wife
Yeah.
for Rachel. He dumped his wife for Rachel, and Rachel, she had this thing where she would get tired of guys real fast.
Mm,
Like she'd come on strong to a guy and then dump him just like that. That was her habit in those days.
Mm.
So she did that to Matt. Matt and his wife got divorced. She ruined his marriage. And I always didn't like that about Rachel. So I was happy one day when she went out with another bodybuilder named Ray Mentzer, who was Mike Mentzer's brother.
Oh, of course.
Now Ray Mentzer had a volcanic temper, very bad temper. And I remember she was sitting on a machine called the Pec Deck, and she was Ray was standing right in front of her, like his face right in her face, and he was screaming at her. And Ray was scary when he got mad. I mean, because he was a big, big guy, very strong, and Rachel looked like she was gonna literally scared to death.
Mm.
I mean, that's one incident I remember. He didn't do anything to her. She just. But she eventually married. She met some show business guy who had a lot of money. That's what she really wanted all her life. She wanted to meet a rich guy because the bodybuilders had no money.
Mhm.
They weren't good for a long-term relationship. So she met some producer. He had the money that she needed, and she still marries him to this day. She lives somewhere near Palm Springs. She's very happy. And she looks, and I have to say, she looks terrific. She's in her 60s. She still looks great. She still
Mm.
looks just like Corey Everson. They look terrific, these girls. They look terrific. They
And
really
when I never hear anything about her. I heard something about Corey a few months ago. Something had happened, but yeah, I had never heard the name before, and I remember the magazines. She was
yeah,
it. She
yeah.
was she was all over those magazines. You mentioned Mentzer, and he had a very tumultuous life, to say the least. Wait, talk about Mentzer,
I talking about Mike or Ray?
Mike. I know you
Yeah,
mentioned Ray, but let's talk about Mike.
yeah. Mike was kind of a intellectual guy, compared to, I mean, his big idol was Ayn Rand. If you know anything about Ayn
Sure.
Rand's philosophy, it's basically, to put it in a nutshell, me first. In other words, you live to satisfy your own needs, and everybody is not important. And that was her, and he kind of adopted that himself. Although Mike didn't treat people badly, but what happened was he competed when he was only about 19 years of age. He competed, I believe it was in 1971 Mr. America, and that was won by another 19-year-old, Casey Viator.
Hmm.
Casey Viator had already been training under the auspices of a guy named Arthur Jones, who developed the Nautilus machines under a very kind of a high intensity training system that involved very brief and infrequent workouts, no more than one or two sets per exercise. The whole workout would work the whole body, like maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And Mike was training in a conventional manner at that time. He met Casey, was extremely impressed by Casey's physique. They got friendly, and Casey told him about Arthur Jones, and Casey and Mike met another guy named Dave Masterakis, who was also a kind of acolyte of Arthur Jones, and he became convinced to use the high intensity training system, and he stayed like that the rest of his life. Now the problem with Mike was I got along great with Mike and Ray. I got along very well with them. In fact, when we used to go to contests, we'd sit together. We all had mustaches. People thought I was the third Mentzer brother. you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
I introduced Mike to I was standing at a contest backstage with Mike at one of the USA contest, and they had a female contest, and there was a girl in the contest named Julie McNew. And you notice how I'm good at certain names and bad at
Now
others.
that name comes out of the blue. That was the
Yeah,
Julie McNoob,
yeah, I have this weird brain effect.
but
I
we
can
couldn't remember Jay Cutler. See,
the famous I can't remember, but the obscure names I remember. Anyway, so we're standing looking at this female bodybuilders, and we're on the side of the stage, and Mike is suddenly says, "Oh my God, that girl is beautiful." And I'm looking, I'm thinking, which girl's that, Mike? He says, that one. And I'm looking, it was Julie Mc. I didn't know her name was Julie McNeil, but he says, boy, I would sure like to go out with her. I said, well, go up to him, Mike. And Mike was already a famous bodybuilder. You know,
Mhm.
I said, Mike, I bet you she'd be very impressed if you just said hello. He's like, I just can't. I can't. I can't. He was actually,
He was that shy.
yeah. Mike Mentzer, who came out so strong, so aggressive when he talked, was absolutely, you know, totally afraid of going up to this. So
Yeah.
I went up to Julie McDougall and I said, listen, my name's Jerry. I said, I have a friend. I said, he really is impressed with your physique. He'd like to meet you if it's okay with you. She said, she was very friendly. She said, sure. So I beckoned for Mike to come along and I introduced, and she, she recognized Mike right away. Make a long story short, they went out together for a couple of years after that. So I
Oh,
introduced them. So,
nice.
but an interesting story about Mike and Ray was, I met Mike when he first came out to California, Gold's Gym in the late 70s. He came out from, I believe it was Maryland. He was living back east.
Hmm.
And, he had I think he had already won a Mr. America, something like that. And he was mildly friendly, not that friendly, but mildly friendly. We talk occasionally, uh, and same with Ray. And then what happened was I got word that their mother had passed away back east in Pennsylvania, where they came from, and I sent them a condolence card. You know, they never mentioned it, but their whole attitude towards me changed after that. They
Hmm.
became very friendly. We
Oh,
became like buddies after that.
well, that was a nice gesture, you
Yeah,
know.
I mean, I knew that Mike was very close with his mother, and and so was Ray, and I just felt that that was the right thing to do, and their whole attitude towards me changed after that.
And when they died, maybe days apart, that
Yeah,
was pretty shocking.
that was shocking. But you see, a lot of people didn't like Mike because he had what they call a dogmatic attitude,
Mm,
especially when it came to the high intensity training. In other words, if you didn't train in a high intensity manner, you're an idiot.
mm.
That was his, that was kind of the Ayn Rand thing that in him. And he idolized Arthur Jones. He once said Arthur Jones is God. He
Yeah,
idolized Arthur Jones. Arthur Jones, I used to talk to Arthur Jones he was the same way, very dogmatic. You cannot argue with Arthur Jones. Same, almost like Vince Gironda in that way. In other words, if you question Arthur Jones, forget it. I mean, he would hate your guts. He'd start cursing at you. So I would just listen. Arthur Jones used to lecture me on the phone. Wouldn't say a word. I would just lecture. But Mike idolized Arthur Jones to the extent that if you look at videos of him, you could look this up yourself. Look at videos of Mike giving seminars after he stopped competing, and you'll notice he had a certain unique way of speaking. Then what you do next is you look at a video of Arthur Jones, and you will notice it's his exact way of speaking, same inflection. He actually started to talk like Arthur Jones. But Mike was so a lot of people didn't like Mike because of that attitude. That in other words, if you don't train this way, you're a moron and this and that. I got along great with Mike. I never had any problems with Mike or Ray. Got along great with them all the way up to the end. Maybe it was because I sent him that card. I don't know.
yeah. Do
I
you think he
never.
got robbed in 1980?
I think he could have placed higher. Whether he should have won or not, I wouldn't have any. Let me put it this way: I wouldn't have had any. I wasn't there. I don't like to comment on contests that I didn't attend because it's a little different when you see it in person. However, I wouldn't have had any problem if Mike Mentzer had won. Chris was in great shape too, who got second. And I'll tell you a real quick story related to that. Joe Weider wanted me to write an article on these series of pro contests called the Grand Prix contests. They were held in Europe after Mr. Olympia. I attended some of them, but there was one or two that I didn't attend. And what happened was I didn't go to the contest. I hadn't seen any photos, so I interviewed a guy named Chris Lunn, who was one of the main Weider photographers who did attend the contest. I interviewed him in a hotel room in New York, and he told me the details of the contest. And based on that, I wrote the article. Now, one of the contests was held at this huge sports festival they hold in Germany every year called the FIBO. It's still
Hmm.
held to this day. I wasn't there, but I depend on what Chris Lund said. Chris Lund told me that, they had all these booths set up, where they're selling things. And a lot of the bodybuilders were in the booths posing.
Hmm.
So Chris Lund told me, he says the contest was very sparsely attended because the people had already seen the bodybuilders posing in the booth. So
Right.
they didn't go to the contest. I wrote
Yeah.
that in the article. So a couple of what was it? A couple of days later, the contest was promoted by a guy named Albert Busick, who was very friendly with Arnold. He was at Arnold's wedding. a couple of days. Arnold Busick also had a volcanic temper. I was sitting in a restaurant, I think it was in France, a couple of days later. At the table was Chris Len and his wife and me and one other person who I don't remember. All of a sudden, I see who walks in the restaurant, but Albert Busick, and he sees me, and and his face contorts, and he walks across the restaurant straight to me, and he starts screaming at me. He says, "How dare you say that the contest was sparsely attended?" Oh no, this was a couple of months after, because the magazine had already come out. He says, "How dare you say that's not true?" And this and that. And I glanced over at Chris Len, he's laughing because Chris knows that I got the information from him. So, Busick's face was already, it looked like he was going to slug me. He was so mad. So I just listened to him and I said, "Albert, you're absolutely right. I deeply apologize. I made a mistake. You have my word that I will never write about a contest unless I'm there in person." And we shook hands. And after that, Busick was friendly to me and we let it go.
But you're so right about not being there. The secondhand account it's not good enough.
Well, it's like you mentioned Arnold in '73. I mean, in the photos, you could see he looks tremendous.
Yeah.
You had to see him in person to really appreciate that. Like when he went on the beach that day, I'll never forget. There were 500 eyes looking. It was something out of a movie, man. I'm telling you.
Well, I could just, in his prime, I mean, it was bigger than life. I mean, the guy was just incredible. But you mentioned something what's something that's really odd to me? He had no abdominals, not really. He
No,
was kind of smooth in the middle.
right.
And by today's standards, Jer, his legs weren't up to snuff with his upper body. But yet
Especially
somehow the whole
1980.
package was great, right?
Yeah, yeah. His legs were always his problem, but in '73, his legs were actually pretty good.
And how were the calves? The calves were always supposed to be weak, but I heard he got them up.
He got them up when he competed in the first Mr. Universe he competed in was 1966.
Hmm.
He was defeated in that contest by Chet Yorton, American bodybuilder,
I
and
know the name.
Chet had great calves,
Mm,
and the judges told Arnold, who was only what I think he was 19 or 20 years old. Arnold was actually much bigger than Chet Yorton, but he was smooth. He
yeah.
didn't have the refined. Chet came in with the California tan and all that. He had the great calves, so Arnold lost. And the judges told him, he says, you lost mainly because the American had better calves than you. So Arnold consulted his mentor, his idol was Reg Park.
Mm,
So Reg says to him, "Listen, Arnold," he says, "you got to train your calves hard and heavy. You got to give them priority." So Arnold started doing very heavy calf raises, started training him several days a week. Eventually, he built up his calves where they got to be pretty damn impressive, if I say so myself. Now, there's been a long held rumor that Arnold had calf implants put
mm.
in. Now, I never confirmed that. I don't know if that's true or not. I do know that Arnold, even during the off season, he would kind of slack off on his training when there wasn't. That's what the bodybuilders did back in the '70s. They didn't train hard all year round, which was smart because they'd give their body a rest. They would come in maybe 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 days a week at the most, do a half-hour workout, leave. Frank Zane, we called it the 20-minute workout. He'd come in and train for 20 minutes and leave. But Arnold, I noticed, always the one muscle he trained hard all year was his calves. He always trained them, always, every workout he trained his calves.
Mm.
So I don't know. To this day, I really don't know whether Arnold, I know that today, you have to understand when you age, the muscles that go first are the peripheral muscles, meaning the muscles in the forearm and from the legs up. So the calves and the forearms, when you age, no matter who you are, those are the muscles that will kind of deteriorate or atrophy. I mean, when I see Arnold today, he has nothing really. I'm saying his calves are abnormally skinny, but they certainly don't look like they did when I saw him in his prime. His calves were 4 times bigger.
Hmm.
Then I was even surprised. I looked at a video the other day of Dorian Yates, who had gigantic calves when he
Yeah.
competed. Dorian Yates claimed he had 22-inch calves, and I believe if you look at them, they were
Yeah.
gigantic, bigger than Arnold's. Yet you see him today, it's not that they're skinny, they're average. You wouldn't look twice at them. I mean,
Yeah.
So that's an age thing. It's nothing that they did wrong. It just it has to do with motor neurons. It gets a little complicated, but it's something you can't avoid. You know, I remember Bill Pro, who was my childhood idol when I got in bodybuilding. Bill had gigantic forearms. He always trained his forearm. And then as an older man, you know, of course, you know, the man's like 60, 70 years of age. I remember looking at him thinking, what happened to his forearms?
It's a
They were
shame.
gone. I didn't understand at that time about the, you know, the age atrophy effect, but that's, it happened. The point is it's unavoidable. It happens to everybody.
Well, you know, with me, my legs are definitely weaker than they used to be. My upper
Yeah.
body, I'm able to maintain much easier than the lower portion of my body.
Yeah. Yeah. It happens with everybody. You know, the old saying, the legs go first. It's
Yeah,
true. The
yeah.
legs do go first.
Well, you know, Jerry, you know, we can go 2 hours, but I don't want to keep you. And that was fantastic. And let's not make it so long next time.
Sure. It sounds good. How's everything there in New York, by the way?
Well, I'll tell you, we have a mayor's race
Mhm.
that's panning out to be very interesting.
Yeah, I
Uh,
saw that. Yeah.
and it's very controversial. That
Yeah.
this Mamdani, the Democrat nominee,
Right.
has gained so much traction that we're panicking here in New York because they say, I don't know what kind of a guy he is really.
Yeah.
I just hear things. He's the devout communist. He's the you know, he's a socialist, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
What do you, when you look at New York from where you are, your perspective, what do you see?
Well, I've been actually watching that mayoral race.
What do you
And
think about it?
well, the thing is, they people call a guy a politician who, for example, like Kamala had went through this also.
Hmm.
Kamala Harris, any politician who starts to uh, uh, offer a platform that actually helps people, like lowering taxes. Kamala was talking about giving $24,000 to young people so they can buy homes, giving increasing Medicare, all that. Right away, they're called a socialist or a communist because, and that's what this Madani, I think that is that it. He,
Mamdani.
I mean, he's talking about having rent freezes and this and that. I mean, it's all sounds fantastic, but whether he can actually do it is questionable. But he's singing the song that people like to hear. I think that's why he won that primary. Now, the thing that bothers me about him is that I didn't hear him say this, but I heard that he refuses to kind of condemn some of the stuff that's going on in the Middle
That's what
East.
I was going to bring up to you. That
Yeah,
to me, that's what makes me very
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
That bothers me about the guy. But you know, when you make these kind of promises, I mean, like Bernie Sanders, who's everybody calls him a socialist. He admits being a socialist.
Yeah, yeah.
To me, a socialist in that sense means a politician that's for the people, that he really wants to do things that help the people rather than the big corporations and the wealthy people like the most Republicans. So socialist politician is actually a pretty good person. The problem is that a lot of the things they espouse, I don't think they have any realistic way of. I'll give you one example: universal health care.
Hmm.
I mean, Hillary Clinton talked about it. Bernie Sanders constantly talks. He talks about how all the other countries in the world, most of them, they all give free healthcare, which is a fact. That's true. But in the United States, it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and they have lobbyists in Washington who pay off all the Republican politicians not to always. Every time it comes up, every time they try and offer a bill that'll improve Medicare or offer some form of universal health care, it's immediately voted down because the healthcare industry, they make, I mean, if you look at the salaries of these guys, they make $225,000 a day. They're going to fight that to the death. They're
Yeah.
never get, because with universal health care, that industry is dead in the water. It's never going to happen. So my problem with the so-called socialist politicians is I love what they're saying, including Kamala and Bernie. But the thing is, realistically, it's not going to happen because of the
So
payoffs.
he wants to give everything away for free, and somebody's
Yes.
paying for those freebies.
Yeah, who's going to pay for it? That's the problem.
Somebody's got to pay for these things. And you
Yeah.
know, Andrew Cuomo gave a very poor showing. He
Yeah.
beat the shit out of Andrew Cuomo in the primary. Now he
Yeah.
has Curtis Sliwa, the Republican. He has Cuomo still in the race as the independent. And we have Eric Adams, the mayor, the current
Yeah, I
mayor,
know, yeah.
and we have him. So it's something that hasn't happened in New York. And they have what do they call that? Ranked choice voting here in New York City, which is kind of I don't care for the procedure. I
Mhm.
like the real down to earth kind of thing that we've been doing for years. They put this ranked choice voting in where it's kind of skewed, and you don't get the results that you can't. For instance, they held the primary in was it yeah, in June, when nobody was around, Jer. You had about 21% of the population actually coming out to vote. Nobody
Yeah,
came out to vote. You
oh,
had
man,
you had 8 out of 10 people staying home.
yeah. So that's an unrealistic voting,
And now
population.
and now they're going to have this other thing, come November, more people will show up because it's November, people are actually here. So we'll see what's happening, but
Yeah, but
yeah.
this guy Eric Adams, wasn't he was like convicted of corruption and all
Well,
this.
he got in good with our president.
Yeah, pardon. I
And
mean,
he got part. I'm telling you, he was off to the who's gal if not
yeah,
for President
yeah,
Trump.
yeah, but I mean, this thing is that it's crazy. This pardon and stuff. I mean, he pardoned 1,500 people that stormed the Capitol and attacked police officer. I mean, the level of corruption. I mean, if you study history, there's been a couple of bad presidents. I used to love writing. I wrote a book about the presidents when I was 8 years old, believe it or not. But I mean, there's been a couple of bad presidents: Warren G. Harding, Franklin Pierce, and so on and so forth. But I mean, there's never been anything that compares to Donald Trump.
I
Nothing.
know.
It's incredible. I mean, it's like surrealistic. I can't believe what. And people voted for this guy with 34 felony convictions. He sexually molested something. Was it 26 women and this and that? Got 33,000 lives. I mean,
Well, have you
I
ever
feel
seen
like,
the country at odds the way it is right now? Half the
oh,
people.
horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to say one thing for the president. He's got his backers. I mean, it's a
yeah,
cult. It's a cult. These guys are whatever
definite
he
cult,
says goes. Uh,
definite cult.
it gets to be. I wish we could find some middle ground.
Let
Sometimes
me
we
tell
just can't.
Ralph, you know what is really scary? Let me tell you
Hmm.
something that's going to terrify you. Let's say that the Democrats win big in the next national election. You know
Right.
that let's say they get control of the House and the Senate. The very first thing they're going to do, and you know this, is they're going to start impeachment proceedings against Trump, right?
Oh, of course, of
And now,
course.
now impeachment, but people don't understand impeachment doesn't mean that you get thrown out. It just means it's an accusation. The
Hmm.
actual trial occurs in the Senate. Now, if the Democrats get control of the Senate, then they can get rid of Trump. But what happens next? The president becomes J.D. Vance.
Hmm.
To me, in some ways, this guy is just so full of crap. He's even almost as bad or worse than Trump. Now, let's say they get rid of J.D. Vance. Who's the third guy? Mike Johnson.
Mike
I
Johnson.
mean, it's like we're doomed. We're
I
doomed.
I hear you.
I don't
It's
know.
it's
I
it's
mean,
it's well, it's so again, I like, there's so far to the right. The MAGA crowd is just so the ideology is not,
yeah,
I just can't identify with what they talk about half the time. And you know something? What's funny about the whole thing? President Trump, Donald Trump was once a very liberal Democrat.
I know. I
When he was running around New York, Jer, he was
remember.
far from a right wing Republican.
I remember that. I remember that. You know,
He's
and
running
the
the
thing,
clubs here, and he's running the clubs chasing women over here. He was certainly not MAGA back
yeah.
then.
But the ironic thing about the thing is that if you remember, what really got Trump elected, he got elected more than anything else. If you saw the interviews of the Trump cultists, every time they went out and interviewed him at the rallies, they'd say, "Why do you support Donald Trump so much?" And they'd say stuff like, it was always the same answer: "I can't afford the food and the gas, everything." And
Right.
Donald Trump is going to lower it. He's going to make it. He's helped. Donald Trump is one of us. He understands the needs of the common man, whereas the Democrats, they don't care. They got an ass back. Donald Trump
No,
understand a guy sits on a gold toilet bowl understands.
I know.
and, and
I know.
and now the food prices are higher than they've ever been. I don't know how they are in New York, But
High.
every time I go to the super, Ralph, I buy these vegetables that
Yeah.
have tripled in price in the last
Uh,
month. Tripled, not doubled, tripled.
do
So
you go to a regular supermarket?
yeah, just go to a regular supermarket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think about organic compared to conventional, like vegetables?
It's funny that you say that because I'm going to do an article. I have this Applied Metabolics publication. It's appliedmetabolics.com. I'm gonna do a huge article on whether organic food is actually superior. And I actually wrote one years ago, and at that time, the organic foods actually were a little bit better than and the reason why was it's not so much a lot of people prefer organic foods because of the notion of pesticides and chemicals that are used to process regular food. But in my research showed that the benefit of organic food was they were actually higher in nutrients,
Mm.
considerably higher in nutrients. So they're more expensive, but I would say to go with organic food if you can. I do. My fruits and vegetables I eat are all organic.
Yeah, I try. I try
Yeah,
the best I can with that.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, Jerry, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure.
We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, Ralph. Good to talk to you.
Oh, same here, man. Take
Take
care.
care. Take care. Bye bye.